Alrighty, so we will begin the presence portion of the conference. So in this section for the afternoon, we'll start off with 4 performances. The first of which will be live in London, and we'll kind of alternate live in London, live in Edmonton. You will have performances first from Katherine van Kampen. So Katherine van Kampen is a final year medical student at McMaster University and a graduate of their Bachelor of Health Sciences program. They are an aspiring journalist and surgeon interested in exploring the crossroads of medicine, art, and the humanities. Their work can be found in the CBC and Healthy Debate. And I think since match day was on March 22nd, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Katie has matched to UBC. No, she's clapping. I think we can. Katie has matched to UBC, to their orthopedic surgery program. So congratulations, Katie. That's a massive accomplishment. And today, Katie is going to be doing a spoken word performance, and her story weaves the world of a magic forest and the trauma bay, highlighting that sometimes you prepare for things that never happen, and that's just a part of playing the game. And this was originally performed with the Nocturnists. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Katie.
All right. Okay, so yeah, my name's Katie. A little background about this story. One time after a very particularly bad, dull day on internal medicine, I was bored, so I decided to write this story about how much I miss being in the trauma bay, and I was working on my Dungeons and Dragons session, and I was like, you know what? This is the same thing. And then I wrote this story. You're walking in a forest. It's slightly damp. The trees are above you and light filters down. You look around at your friends, your companions, the people you trained with to become a knight. Now, standing in the center of the box formation between the 4 of you is a princess. She's tall, pretty. And the only thing she said to you so far is she really doubts whether or not you can protect her. After all, no one knows what happens when you walk through the woods. But you keep going, putting one foot in front of the other, the leaves crunching against your boot. You just need to make it to the other side of the woods, and that's it. First mission complete. My name is Katherine van Kampen. I am a 3rd-year medical student at McMaster University. I'm an incoming PGY1 at UBC Orthopedics, and I'm also a dungeon master for our little tabletop role-playing game known as Dungeons and Dragons. So for those of you who don't know, Dungeons & Dragons is a role-playing game in which I, the Dungeon Master, create this story for my players to walk through. And it's collaborative because sometimes I put dragons in front of my players, and instead of fighting them, they decide to befriend the dragon, and then the dragon carries them off into the sunset. Now, when I'm not spending my time thinking about castles in the sky or beasts lurking in the woods, I like to spend the rest of my time at the hospital role-playing as a doctor. I'm dodging out of the way of nurses pushing past with their blood pressure machine, moving out of the way of doctors too busy looking down at their notes to notice me. I'm heading to the trauma bay. I pull on my yellow gown and my N95, which for some reason always smells like pickles. And I head there. I stand in the corner as the stretcher comes down the hall and the patient lands in the center of the room full of fluorescent lights beaming down on them. I'm in the corner holding the warm blanket, my only contribution to this scene, as the primary care team comes and does the primary survey. This is a 24-year-old woman found on the side of the road. No one knows what happened to her. The anesthesiologist is trying to put their stethoscope to her chest, and she moves away. The team tries really hard to console her, but she's afraid. Now, at the back of the trauma bay is the trauma team leader, and they direct the orchestra that is the trauma bay. They step over that yellow line, heading towards the patient as the team is trying to calm her down as she moves away. And they roll a charisma check and say, look, I'm sorry about what happened. We just need to do some tests. Is it okay if my team does that? We're just trying to help. I watch as the patient relaxes into the stretcher and the anesthesiologist finally places their stethoscope to her chest. Now, you've come to this part in the forest where it gets to a clearing, and your trip so far has been pretty uneventful. The Dragonborn has chugged a 6-pack of ale, and the wizard is way too preoccupied looking at the mushrooms on the side of the road to notice very much. I tell my players to roll a perception check, and the players all groan because they know that when I say this, that something's about to happen and they're probably not going to like it very much. The dice clatters on the table, and I look at the numbers. So, the Dragonborn has rolled an 18, but the wizard has rolled an 8. And thus, the wizard is way too busy looking at their pet gecko on their shoulder to notice that coming out of the trees is a dark blur heading straight towards the princess, the jaws outstretched to bite into her neck. The Dragonborn has already noticed this, and the Dragonborn steps in front of the princess, holding their blade up, blocking the blow of the beast, and with one mighty movement, they roll to attack. They roll a 20, a critical success, and the head of the beast falls to the ground in front of the princess, who is looking a little bit mortified at this point. The Dragonborn wipes their blade off on their armor and leans on their greatsword. So, you doubt our skills now, princess? And you realize that maybe your trip through the woods isn't going to be that bad after all. I'm back in the emergency room. It's late or early, I'm not too sure. I'm trying really hard to stay awake as I chug another bottle of Coke. And then a nurse walks into the charting room and talks to my attending. Doctor, the patient isn't cooperating with getting tests. Can you please come talk to me? My attending huffs and I follow them along to where the patient is. It's the same 25-year-old woman who was in the trauma bay. She's clutching her broken clavicle. My attending stands at the foot of her bed. Why don't you want to get these tests? The patient is tired. He wants to go home. I thought I already had tests. I'm just really tired now. The attending tries to explain why these tests are important and why they're important to our management. But the patient is too emotionally afraid, too scared to really commit to what the attending is saying. I watch as the attending and the patient struggle to understand each other, the attending too exhausted to explain anything clearly at this point. And then finally, the attending snaps. Why can't you just get these tests? You're wasting everybody's time. The emergency room is quiet. The nurse turns on their heel, squeaking against the floor, and walks back to the nursing station. I watch as the patient, still clutching her broken clavicle, stands and leaves against medical advice. My attending storms off, and I'm left standing there, wondering, did we miss a perception check, an investigation check, or was this just a critical failure? You've now come to this part in the forest where all the trees come in on each other in a dark halo of vegetation. The only light is the elf's torch. I tell the players to roll another perception check. And they roll pretty well, 15, a 14, a 12, another 14. I tell them to hear rustling in the forest off to the side of the path. You see a flicker of movement, and soon, jumping out of the bushes, is an assassin wearing all black and pointing a silver dagger at the princess's throat. Step aside, it's her I want. Your hands are sweaty as you grip the palm of your sword. The Dragonborn has stepped in front of the princess, and the player looks at me from across the table and asks me, Dungeon Master, what does the assassin look like? I look down at my notes and realize I had not described the assassin that I assumed they would try to kill immediately. Okay, the assassin is wearing all black. They have this very nice wool cloak slung over one side of their shoulder. Now, Dungeon Master, I want to know how attractive is the assassin? Is the assassin like up here, down here? I look back at my notes and I still hadn't written anything about this. All right. The assassin has a strong jawline, bright eyes that reflect the light of the torch. The dragonborn is nodding. Okay. I seduce the assassin. Okay then. I ask them to roll a charisma check. They roll a 20. The table is going wild. The dragonborn steps forward in front of the assassin and says, "So, you come around here often?" And of course, the assassin falls head over heels in love with the scaly beast before them. The players make it out of the forest in one piece, avoiding all the traps I had planned, all the survival checks, and all the beasts that I had put waiting for them in the woods. When I look back at the notes that were unused, I chuckle to myself. Sometimes you prepare for things that never happen, and that's just part of playing the game. I'm back in the trauma bay, this time on my general surgery rotation. We have a 54-year-old man coming in from a motor vehicle accident. I cast the message spell. My phone vibrates in my pocket. So my resident's too busy on the ward, they're gonna come down soon. I'm standing in the corner of the trauma bay as the patient's wheeled in, and I see the spot where the general surgery resident is supposed to stand and do their part of the primary survey. Now, I've done the primary survey before, just not without the resident around. But I know that the longer it takes to get through this, the longer it takes to get to the patient to imaging. So, despite being a little nervous, I step forward and I roll the investigation check. I feel for the patient's abdomen, look at their legs or deformities, and it is my turn to present. Everybody is looking at me. I roll a charisma check. I must have rolled pretty bad because when I start talking, my voice cracks. The patient's belly is soft and non-distended. I struggle through the rest of my lines. My resident comes down. They roll their own investigation check, clearly better than mine, because they realize that there's some tenderness over the patient's shin, which eventually reveals to be a non-displaced, very small fracture. I go home that night feeling kind of bad about missing that. And to distract myself, I start thinking about the next Dungeons and Dragons session I have planned. And then I realize something. I'm just a level 3 rogue, but my resident is a level 10 Dragonborn paladin. And one day, I'm going to level up too.